Human blood splattered on the cracked cockpit window as Captain Zachary Thomas wrenched the joystick, dodging another barrage of the Draconis death rays. The human fleet scattered, engines sputtering, shields flickering, hulls scorched and pockmarked by the lizard-like aliens' superior firepower. But surrender was not an option, not with the survival of humanity hanging by a thread. The Draconis had ravaged Earth's colonies, slaughtering billions and scattering the remnants of mankind across the stars like cosmic dust. Now, the reptilian aggressors sought to exterminate the last bastion of human resistance, a ragtag fleet of battered ships, crewed by desperate survivors who refused to go quietly into the void. Zachary gritted his teeth as his ship shuddered under another hit. Sparks sprayed from damaged consoles, and the acrid stench of burnt circuitry filled the air. The Draconis command ship loomed on the view screen, its sleek black hull bristling with weaponry. At its helm was Prylar, the ruthless and cunning Draconis warlord, who had made it his personal mission to wipe humanity from the face of the galaxy. But the humans fought back with a ferocity that belied their primitive technology. They swarmed the Draconis ships like enraged hornets, darting in and out of formation, exploiting every weakness in their enemies' defenses. Zachary knew they couldn't win a straight-up fight, but maybe, just maybe, they could buy enough time for the fleet to make a desperate jump to the one place the Draconis would never expect them to go. Earth, the birthplace of humanity, long abandoned and forgotten, a world the Draconis considered a desolate, inhospitable wasteland, unworthy of their attention. But to the humans, it was their last hope, a chance to regroup, repair their ships, and mount a final stand against their alien oppressors. As the battle raged around him, Zachary made his decision. With a defiant roar, he gunned the engines and aimed his ship straight at the heart of the Draconis fleet. It was a suicide run, but if it bought his people the time they needed to escape, it would be worth it. Zachary's ship hurtled toward Earth's surface, flames licking its hull as it tore through the planet's toxic atmosphere. The captain braced for impact, his teeth rattling as the craft slammed into the barren ground, kicking up clouds of ash and debris. He pried open the warped hatch, coughing as he stumbled out into the hellish landscape. A ragged chorus of voices called back, the surviving crew members emerging from the wreckage. They were a motley bunch, battered and bloodied, but alive. Zachary nodded grimly, taking stock of their surroundings. The air was thick with noxious fumes, stinging their eyes and burning their lungs. The ground was a wasteland of jagged rocks and twisted metal, the remnants of long-abandoned cities. In the distance, a sickly green river snaked through the desolation, its waters bubbling with acid. They salvaged what they could from the ship, weapons, rations, medical supplies, and set out across the ruined landscape. Every step was a struggle, the toxic air sapping their strength, and the treacherous terrain threatening to swallow them whole. As they trekked through the wasteland, they were beset by all manner of horrors. Vicious predators mutated by the planet's poisons stalked them from the shadows. Venomous plants, their tendrils writhing like serpents, lashed out at them from every crevice. But Zachary refused to let his crew succumb to despair. He rallied them with fierce determination, devising clever traps and makeshift weapons to fend off their attackers. They used the planet's own hazards against their foes, luring predators into acidic pools and tricking them into consuming poisonous flora. Meanwhile, high above the planet's surface, Prylar watched the humans' struggles with a mixture of fascination and disgust. He dispatched spy drones to monitor their progress, marveling at their tenacity even as he plotted their demise. But the drones were no match for the planet's dangers or the humans' ingenuity. They were destroyed by lightning storms, dissolved by acid rain, and picked off by Zachary's crackshot snipers and cleverly constructed traps. Prylar's frustration mounted with each failed surveillance attempt. He paced the command deck of his ship, his talons clicking against the polished metal floor. "Those humans are like cockroaches," he snarled, his forked tongue flicking out in agitation. "No matter how many times we crush them, they always seem to survive." He turned to his chief scientist, a spindly creature with bulbous eyes and a mouthful of needle-like teeth. "I want them exterminated once and for all. develop a bioweapon that will target their physiology specifically, something they cannot adapt to or overcome. The scientist bowed low, its voice a rasping whisper. As you command, my lord. The humans will be nothing more than a memory, a footnote in the annals of the galaxy. Pryler grinned, his fangs glinting in the harsh light of the command deck. Soon the universe will be purged of their filth, and the Draconis will reign supreme. As Zachary and his crew trekked through the dense, treacherous jungle, they stumbled upon something that seemed out of place amidst the twisted vines and gnarled trees. Hidden beneath a thick canopy of foliage, the entrance to an ancient alien ruins beckoned, its smooth metallic surface glinting in the dim light. Zachary motioned for his team to approach cautiously. They cleared away the overgrowth, revealing a doorway etched with strange symbols and intricate patterns. With a heave, they pried open the ancient portal, the metal groaning in protest. Inside, the ruins were a marvel of advanced technology. Sleek consoles lined the walls, their screens flickering with alien script. Weapons unlike anything the humans had ever seen were displayed in alcoves, their barrels gleaming with a deadly promise. So if we can figure out how to use this tech, we might finally have a chance against those scaly bastards, Zachary muttered, running his fingers along the edge of a plasma rifle. His crew set to work, poking and prodding at the alien devices, trying to decipher their functions. But as they delved deeper into the ruins' secrets, a low hum began to emanate from the walls. Suddenly a hidden panel slid open, and a swarm of robotic guardians poured forth, their metal bodies glinting in the eerie light. The machines were relentless, their movements precise and deadly. The humans fought back with everything they had, but their weapons barely scratched the robots' armor. Laser blasts ricocheted off the Guardians' shields, and grenades exploded harmlessly against their reinforced chassis. It was a desperate plan, but their only hope. Zachary and his remaining crew fought their way to the heart of the ruins, where a pulsing energy source thrummed with power. They worked frantically, rewiring circuits and rerouting power. Even as the robots closed in around them, the core began to whine, its light growing brighter and brighter until it was almost blinding. With a final, desperate push, Zachary slammed his fist down on the activation switch. The core exploded in a burst of searing light, engulfing the robotic guardians in a wave of destructive energy. When the smoke cleared, the ruins were silent. The guardians lay in twisted heaps, their circuits fried and their armor melted. But the victory had come at a cost. Several of Zachary's crew lay unmoving, their bodies scorched and broken. The survivors gathered what they could from the ruins: weapons, technology, anything that might give them an edge against the Draconis. As they emerged from the jungle, battered but unbroken, they were unaware of the eyes watching them from above. Pryler stared at the feed from his spy drones, his expression a mix of disbelief and grudging respect. These humans had faced technology far beyond their understanding, and yet they had adapted, overcome, and emerged victorious. Armed with the alien weapons salvaged from the ancient ruins, Zachary and his battle-hardened crew prepared for their most daring mission yet. They had captured a Draconis shuttle during a skirmish, and now they would use it to infiltrate a heavily guarded Draconis supply depot orbiting Earth. As they approached the depot, Zachary's heart pounded in his chest. He knew the risks, but the rewards were too great to ignore. The depot was a treasure trove of supplies, munitions, and intelligence that could turn the tide of the war. The stolen shuttle docked with the depot, and Zachary led his team through the airlock. They moved swiftly and silently, disabling the station's defenses from within. Alarms blared as they breached the central control room, but it was too late for the Draconis to stop them. Suddenly, a squad of heavily armed Draconis soldiers burst into the room, led by Commander Zek, Pryler's ruthless right-hand man. Laser blasts filled the air as the two sides clashed in a brutal firefight. The humans' alien weapons evened the odds, punching through the Draconis' armor and shields. Zachary locked eyes with Zek across the chaos of the battle. The two warriors lunged at each other, their fight spilling out onto the station's exterior. They grappled and traded blows, their armor sparking and denting under the relentless assault. Zek's tail lashed out, trying to knock Zachary off balance. But the human captain was too quick. He dodged the blow and retaliated with a vicious uppercut that cracked Zek's helmet. The Draconis commander staggered back, his eyes wide with shock. Zachary pressed his advantage. He lunged forward, grappling with Zek. The two warriors rolled across the hull of the station, locked in a deadly embrace. With a desperate heave, Zachary wrenched Zek's helmet free, exposing the alien's scaly face to Earth's toxic atmosphere. Zek gasped and choked, his eyes bulging as he clawed at his throat. Zachary stood over him, his weapon aimed at the fallen commander's head, but there was no need to strike a final blow. Zek convulsed and went still, his body succumbing to the poisonous air. Zachary turned back to the depot where his crew had gained the upper hand. The Draconis soldiers lay dead or dying, their blood pooling on the metal floor. The humans worked quickly, raiding the depot's stores and transferring supplies and munitions to their own vessels. As they combed through the depot's databanks, they made a chilling discovery. Plans for a Draconis bioweapon designed to target human physiology and wipe out their species once and for all. Zachary's blood ran cold as he realized the magnitude of the threat they faced. They had struck a blow against the Draconis, but the war was far from over. With the bioweapon looming on the horizon, the stakes had never been higher. Zachary gathered his crew, his eyes hard with resolve. Zachary's heart pounded as he led his team through the airlock of the Draconis research facility. Their stolen shuttle docked seamlessly with the station's exterior. The advanced alien tech they had scavenged allowed them to bypass the security systems, slipping in undetected. Inside, the sterile white corridors stretched out before them, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights. The air was thick with the stench of chemicals and the hum of machinery. Zachary motioned for his team to split up, each taking a different route to the main laboratory. As he crept through the facility, Zachary's mind raced with thoughts of the bioweapon and the countless lives at stake. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every sound a potential alarm. But he pushed forward, driven by a fierce determination to stop Pryler's genocidal plans. At last, he reached the main lab. The doors hissed open, revealing a cavernous room filled with rows upon rows of stasis pods. Inside each pod, a human figure floated in a green, viscous liquid, their faces contorted in silent agony. Zachary's blood ran cold as he recognized one of the faces. Michael, his brother, lost years ago during the Draconis invasion. He had always held out hope that Michael was alive, but to see him like this, reduced to a test subject in a vile experiment. Rage boiled up inside Zachary, white-hot and all-consuming. He slammed his fist against the nearest pod, cracking the glass. Alarms blared, but he didn't care. He would tear this place apart with his bare hands if he had to. His team burst into the room, weapons drawn. They set to work planting explosives, rigging the facility to blow. But before they could finish, a cold voice cut through the chaos. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Zachary spun around to see Pryler standing in the doorway, flanked by a squad of heavily armed Draconis soldiers. The alien leader's eyes glinted with malice, his lips curled in a triumphant sneer. "You're too late, human," Pryler hissed. "The bioweapon is complete. With a single command I can unleash it upon your pathetic planet, wiping out your species once and for all." Zachary's grip tightened on his weapon, his finger hovering over the trigger. But Pryler just laughed. "Go ahead, shoot me. It won't change anything. The bioweapon will still deploy and your people will still die unless—" Pryler's voice trailed off, his eyes narrowing. "Unless you surrender, join the Draconis and I will spare your planet. Your brother, too. He will be released, along with the other test subjects." Zachary's mind reeled. Surrender to the Draconis, the very monsters who had slaughtered countless humans and left Earth in ruins. It was unthinkable, but if it meant saving his brother, saving the human race— He lowered his weapon, his voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside him. "I'll surrender, but only if you keep your word. Release the captives. Destroy the bioweapon." Pryler's smile widened, his fangs glinting in the harsh light. "Of course, you have my word, as the supreme leader of the Draconis. He extended a clawed hand, his eyes glittering with triumph. "Do we have a deal, Captain Zachary Thomas?" Zachary, hesitating for only a moment, took Pryla's outstretched hand, sealing the deal that would save humanity from extinction, but at a terrible cost. The Draconis guards rushed forward, seizing Zachary roughly and dragging him from the lab. As promised, the human captives were released from their stasis pods, stumbling out into the corridor weak and disoriented. Among them, Michael emerged, blinking in the harsh light. He locked eyes with Zachary as he was hauled away, a look of confusion and betrayal etched on his gaunt face. Zachary was brought before Pryla in a stark interrogation chamber, where the Draconis leader subjected him to relentless questioning. At first, Zachary remained defiant, his answers curt and evasive, but as the hours stretched into days, Pryla's methods grew more insidious. The alien leader delved deep into Zachary's mind, using advanced Draconis technology to pry loose his memories and thoughts. Slowly, painfully, the truth about the Draconis began to emerge. "We were not always as you see us now," Pryla hissed, his voice echoing in Zachary's mind. "Once we were a peaceful race, content to explore the stars and marvel at the wonders of the universe." Images flashed through Zachary's consciousness, visions of a lush, vibrant world, where the Draconis lived in harmony with their environment. But then came the cataclysm, a disaster that shattered their homeworld and forced them to flee into the void. "We had to adapt, to become strong, or fade into extinction," Pryla continued, his tone almost regretful. "I am one of the few who remember the old ways, who dream of a return to our lost paradise." Zachary gasped as realization dawned. Earth, with its harsh, unforgiving environment, was a mirror of the Draconis' ancestral home. Pryla's obsession with the planet was not born of mere conquest, but of a desperate hope for salvation. "The bioweapon," Zachary whispered, his voice hoarse. "It was never meant to wipe us out, was it? It was a tool to unite your people, to give them a common enemy." Pryla's eyes narrowed, his scales rippling with anger. "You understand nothing, human. I will do whatever it takes to save my species, even if it means sacrificing yours." As Zachary slipped into unconsciousness, his mind reeling from the psychic assault, Michael and the human resistance were hard at work. They had hacked into the Draconis communication network, uncovering the true scope of Pryla's plans. "He's been lying to his own people," Michael said grimly, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "The bioweapon isn't just a tool of conquest, it's a doomsday device, capable of wiping out all life on Earth." The resistance worked feverishly, leaking the information to the various Draconis factions. They included evidence of Pryla's increasingly unstable behavior, his willingness to sacrifice his own kind for the sake of his obsession. As the revelations spread like wildfire, the Draconis turned against each other. Factions clashed in the corridors of the research facility, while others fled back to their ships, eager to distance themselves from Pryla's madness. In the chaos, Michael and the Resistance mounted a daring rescue mission. They stormed the interrogation chamber, catching Pryla's guards off guard. In the ensuing firefight, they managed to free Zachary, dragging him to safety as the facility crumbled around them. But Pryla would not be deterred. Even as his own people turned against him, he remained fixated on his goal. He would have his paradise, even if it meant burning the galaxy to ashes. Pryla stormed into the command center, his eyes blazing with fury. He shoved aside the guards and seized the controls, his claws tightening around the levers. "Enough of this," he snarled. "These humans have defied us for the last time. Prepare the fleet for a full-scale invasion of Earth. We will crush their resistance and claim the planet as our own." The Draconis soldiers hesitated, glancing at each other uncertainly. They had never seen their leader so unhinged, so consumed by rage. But they dared not defy him. They hurried to carry out his orders, the command center erupting into a frenzy of activity. In the chaos, Zachary saw his chance. He slipped out of his restraints and made a break for it, dodging past startled guards and racing down the corridors. His heart pounded in his chest as he ran, his mind reeling with the revelations he had uncovered. He had to find a way to stop this invasion, to save both humanity and the Draconis from annihilation. But how? The two species had been locked in a bitter war for decades, with no end in sight. As he rounded a corner, Zachary collided with a group of Draconis rebels. They recoiled at the sight of him, their weapons raised, but he held up his hands in surrender. "Wait," he gasped. "I'm not your enemy. I want to help." The rebels eyed him warily, but one of them stepped forward. Her scales were a deep emerald green and her eyes shone with intelligence. "Why should we trust you, human?" she hissed. Zachary took a deep breath. "Because I've seen the truth. Pryla's obsession with Earth, his bioweapon project, it's all connected to your lost homeworld. Earth's atmosphere, its ecosystem, it's the key to your survival as a species." The rebel leader's eyes widened. She lowered her weapon, her expression thoughtful. "We've long suspected that there was more to Pryla's plans than mere conquest," she said slowly. "But we never imagined—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "If what you say is true, then we have to act fast. Pryla's invasion force will be launching soon, and if they succeed in wiping out humanity, then the Draconis will be doomed as well," Zachary finished grimly. "We have to find a way to stop them, to show them that there's another path." The rebel leader nodded. "Come with us," she said, "and we have much to discuss." As Zachary followed the rebels deeper into the station, Michael and the human resistance were preparing for the fight of their lives. They had received word of the impending invasion, and they knew that they were hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned. But they refused to give up. They fortified their positions, rigging traps and preparing ambushes. They would use every trick in the book, every ounce of their knowledge of Earth's terrain, to even the odds. Michael stood at the front lines, his jaw set with determination. He had spent years as a captive of the Draconis, but now he was ready to fight back. He gripped his weapon tightly, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the enemy. And then, with a deafening roar, the invasion began. Draconis ships filled the sky, their weapons raining down destruction on the human defenses. The ground shook with the impact of their bombs, and the air was filled with the screams of the dying. But the humans fought back with everything they had. They used guerrilla tactics to outmaneuver the Draconis forces, striking from the shadows and melting away before they could be caught. They used their knowledge of the terrain to lure the enemy into traps, collapsing buildings and bridges on top of them. For a time it seemed like they might actually stand a chance, but as the hours stretched into days, the toll began to mount. The human ranks were thinning, their supplies dwindling. They were being pushed back, inch by bloody inch. Michael gritted his teeth as he fired his weapon, his arm aching from the recoil. They couldn't keep this up much longer. They needed a miracle. And then, just as all seemed lost, a new fleet appeared on the horizon. For a moment Michael's heart sank, thinking that it was more Draconis reinforcements, but as the ships drew closer, he saw that they were emblazoned with a different symbol. It was Zachary, leading a coalition of Draconis rebels and human survivors. They had come with a daring plan, a way to end the war once and for all. As the rebel ships engaged the Draconis fleet, Zachary's voice crackled over the comlink. "Pryla's fleet is in disarray," he said. "Now's our chance." Michael nodded, a grim smile spreading across his face. "Let's finish this," he growled. Together, the humans and their Draconis allies fought their way to the heart of the invasion force, where Pryla's flagship loomed like a dark spectre. Zachary and his team boarded the ship, fighting their way through the corridors to the command deck. "You fools," he spat. "You think you can stop me? I am the savior of the Draconis, the one who will lead us to glory." But Zachary shook his head, his voice calm and steady. "No, Pryla, you're not a savior. You're a tyrant blinded by your own hatred and fear. But there's another way. Earth's atmosphere, its ecosystem. It's the key to your survival, to our survival." He gestured to the rebel leader at his side. We've uncovered the secrets of this planet, the way it can be terraformed to support both our species. We don't have to fight anymore. We can work together, build a new future. Pryla's eyes narrowed, his claws tightening on the hilt of his blade. I would rather die than share this planet with you, he hissed. I would rather see it burn than yield to your filth. He lunged at Zachary, his blade flashing in the light, but the human commander was ready for him. He parried the blow and struck back, steel ringing against steel. Zachary and Pryla's blades clashed in a furious dance, sparks flying as they dueled across the palace steps. Around them the battle raged, Draconis rebels and human fighters locked in a desperate struggle against Pryla's loyalists. The air crackled with energy as the terraforming process began, the once toxic atmosphere shimmering and changing. Pryla snarled, his scales rippling with rage as he saw his world unraveling. He redoubled his attacks, his blade a blur of deadly precision. Zachary met him blow for blow, his own sword flashing in the eerie light of the changing sky. They traded cuts and bruises, each driven by their own unyielding convictions. Zachary fought for a future of unity and peace, while Pryla battled to preserve his vision of Draconis supremacy. For a moment, it seemed that Zachary might prevail. He pressed his advantage, driving Pryla back with a relentless flurry of strikes. But the Draconis leader was cunning and ruthless. As Zachary lunged forward, Pryla twisted aside, revealing a hidden blade in his other hand. The weapon flashed, and Zachary staggered back, his eyes widening in shock. He looked down to see a deep bloody gash across his chest. Pryla grinned, his fangs bared in triumph. Zachary fell to his knees, his strength fading as his lifeblood spilled onto the palace steps. The Draconis rebels, seeing their ally fall, let out a cry of anguish and redoubled their efforts, surging forward to reach him. But it was too late. Zachary collapsed, his sword clattering from his nerveless fingers. The rebels gathered around him, their faces etched with grief and despair. With his last breath, Zachary gazed up at them, his eyes fierce with determination even as the light faded from them. "Don't give up," he rasped, his voice a fading whisper. "Embrace the change. Forge a new future, together with the humans. It's the only way." As Zachary's eyes closed for the final time, the rebels let out a roar of defiance and turned to face Pryla's forces with renewed fury. Pryla, standing triumphant over Zachary's body, watched in disbelief as his loyalists were overwhelmed by the combined might of the rebels and the human fighters. The battle turned into a rout, and Pryla found himself alone, abandoned by his followers. He was quickly surrounded and subdued, his weapons ripped away and his hands bound behind his back. As the terraforming process continued, the sky above the palace shimmered and changed, the once harsh light softening to a gentle glow. The air grew sweet and clean, the toxic fumes fading away. But the cost had been immense. The palace steps were littered with the bodies of the fallen humans and Draconis alike. The survivors, battle-weary and bloodied, looked around in stunned disbelief, scarcely able to comprehend that the fighting was finally over. He rose to his feet, his gaze sweeping over the survivors. Humans and Draconis, once bitter enemies, now stood side by side, united in their grief and their hope for a better future. "We have a chance now," Michael said, his voice ringing out across the palace steps. "A chance to build something new, something better. It won't be easy, but if we work together, if we hold fast to Zachary's dream, we can make it happen." As he spoke, the first rays of the rising sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm golden light over the battered landscape. It was a new dawn, a new beginning, but one that had been bought with blood and sacrifice. In the days that followed, Pryla was brought before a war crimes tribunal, made to answer for the atrocities he had committed. He stood defiant, unrepentant, as the evidence of his guilt was laid bare. The tribunal found him guilty on all counts and sentenced him to life imprisonment, his name forever synonymous with the horrors of the war. As he was led away in chains, Pryla's eyes met Michael's, and for a moment, a flicker of understanding passed between them. They had both lost everything, had both been consumed by the flames of war and hatred, but while Prylar had clung to his rage and his thirst for power, Michael had found a way to transcend it, to reach for something greater. And as the survivors of the war came together to rebuild, as humans and Draconis began the long, slow process of learning to live and work side by side, they did so in the shadow of Zachary's memory and the countless others who had given their lives for the chance at peace. It was a fragile peace, a tenuous one, but it was a start. And as Michael looked out over the fledgling city rising from the ashes of the war, he knew that his brother's dream, the dream of a united Earth, was finally within reach. But the road ahead would be long and hard, and the scars of the conflict would take generations to heal. The memory of the fallen, of the sacrifices made, would hang over them like a constant reminder of the price they had paid for their new beginning. As the survivors began to rebuild the shattered remnants of their world, an unsettling truth emerged from the ashes. The terraforming process, though successful in rendering Earth habitable for the Draconis, had unleashed unforeseen consequences upon the human population. The altered atmosphere, combined with the lingering effects of Prylar's insidious bioweapon, had triggered a wave of rapid and unpredictable mutations in the human genome. At first, the changes were subtle, a heightened sense of hearing, an unnatural resilience to injury. But as the days turned to weeks, the mutations grew more pronounced and more disturbing. Some humans developed extraordinary abilities, their bodies and minds transformed by the alien environment. They could lift boulders with a single hand, read thoughts, or even manipulate the elements. But for every marvel, there was a horror to match it. Others found themselves grotesquely disfigured, their bodies warped beyond recognition, limbs twisted and fused, skin hardened into chitinous plates, and features melted into unrecognizable masses of flesh. The afflicted howled in agony as their humanity was stripped away, leaving behind only monstrous shells of their former selves. Amidst the growing chaos, Michael fought to maintain order and unity. He established safe zones for the unchanged and organized teams to search for survivors. But with each passing day, the situation grew more dire. Fights broke out between the enhanced and the unaltered, while the mutated ones were left to fend for themselves in the wastes. As tensions reached a boiling point, Michael was forced to confront a grim reality. The Earth they had fought so hard to reclaim, the world for which his brother and countless others had sacrificed their lives, could no longer sustain the human race. The very air they breathed and the water they drank were now poisonous to all but the most mutated among them. With a heavy heart, Michael gathered the remaining human survivors and made the most difficult decision of his life. They would evacuate the planet, leaving Earth to the Draconis and those mutated humans who could no longer survive anywhere else. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was the only way to ensure the survival of their species. As the human ships prepared for departure, a small group gathered to witness the end of an era. Among them, a lone figure stood out, Prylar, the once mighty Draconis leader, now a broken and disheveled prisoner. From his cell, he watched as the ships lifted off, carrying the last of humanity into the void. In that moment, a flicker of realization dawned in Prylar's eyes. The bitter irony of his failure washed over him like a tidal wave. In his relentless pursuit to conquer Earth, to mold it into a new homeworld for his species, he had instead handed it to the very beings he had sought to destroy. The Draconis would inherit this world, but it would be a tainted legacy, forever haunted by the ghosts of the war and the price of their victory. As the ships disappeared into the night sky, Michael stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, his gaze fixed on the stars. The weight of the unknown pressed down upon him, a crushing burden of responsibility and uncertainty. He thought of all they had lost, of the sacrifices that had brought them to this moment. The future was a blank canvas, a vast expanse of possibilities and dangers. But even as the questions swirled in his mind, Michael knew one thing for certain: the human spirit, the indomitable will that had carried them through the darkest of times, would endure. They would find a new home, a place to rebuild and start anew. And they would carry the memory of Earth, of the fallen heroes like Zachary, as a beacon of hope and a reminder of the unbreakable bonds that had held them together. With a final glance at the receding planet, Michael turned his eyes to the horizon and the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.